everyone! I'm super excited to be talking about auxiliary instruments for trumpet players today because they're one of my favorite things to play. I've got my E-flat trumpet with me right here. E-flat trumpet is pitched a perfect fourth higher than the standard B-flat trumpet and reads a minor third below concert pitch, just like the E-flat clarinet. Some E-flat trumpets also have a second set of slides and or a second bell that you can put on to put it into D. My E-flat trumpet right now only has the E-flat side, and that's the side it's used more commonly in anyway. E-flat trumpet's a really versatile horn. It gets used in solo settings, chamber music, and orchestral playing, and there are so many applications even in all of those categories too. So I love playing delicate, beautiful music on the E-flat trumpet, like the opening of the Haydn Trumpet Concerto that you just heard a minute ago. But that same delicate sound also makes it really great for some orchestral excerpts. So here's the Ballerina's Dance from Petrushka, played first on C trumpet, and then again on E-flat. The E-flat trumpet's also really great for when we have some demanding parts that would normally be played on the big horns, and we just want to make our lives a little bit easier while still maintaining that full big sound. So this is the other application in orchestral playing, and a great example of this is Bartok's Concerto for Orchestra in the fifth movement. There's a very treacherous high passage written for C trumpet that works up all the way to a concert D flat and has some really agile work up there that's very hard to execute. So a lot of people, myself included, prefer to do it on E-flat trumpet, which just lowers it by a minor third and makes the whole thing a little bit easier. So here's that. Most E-flat trumpets are going to have the same 3 valves as all the other instruments in the trumpet family. There are some players who are preferring to use a 4-valve E-flat trumpet to get that extra low range to be able to play B-flat trumpet parts on it, but this is the exception and not the norm. And additionally, we actually don't play a lot of music that's written specifically for the E-flat trumpet. The Haydn and Hummel concerti are a couple of the only things that really call for it as written. A lot of other times when it's used is just like the Bartok or Petrushka, where we're deciding to play the part on the E-flat trumpet to make our lives easier when the written part is hard. One caveat, the other time an E-flat brass instrument is written is E-flat cornet parts. I don't have an E-flat cornet with me, unfortunately, but it is a staple in the British brass band, being the highest voice in the band. And it also gets carried over to the military band, sometimes with a lot of Sousa marches having an E-flat cornet part that doubles the normal solo cornet part. But for the most part, when we're playing E-flat trumpet, it's not going to be a part that's specifically written in the band or orchestra for it. We're just going to be choosing to use it. All right, next up is Piccolo Trumpet. This little guy's pitched an octave above the standard B-flat trumpet when it's in the key of B-flat, although most piccolos also do have a second lead pipe that they come with in order to put the instrument in A. And the reason for that is a lot of Baroque trumpet parts were written for D trumpet and are in the key of D. And when you play music in D on an A instrument, that puts it into the key of F, which is a really great key. It's a good key for trumpets especially, but it's a great key for the piccolo trumpet. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But first, let's hear it. So this is the first trumpet part from Bach's Magnificat. So I mentioned that the piccolo trumpet is great in the key of F, and there's actually a couple of reasons for that. The first is that we have access to the fourth valve, which lowers the pitch by a perfect fourth. So the lowest written note on piccolo trumpet is a low C sharp below the staff, whereas on B flat trumpet, it would be a written F sharp. The only caution I would give with the low register is that the bottom couple notes, C sharp, D, E flat, tend to sound a little bit muddy and the intonation gets a little bit out there, but Fs and Es are totally fine. The other reason that F is a good key is the high register. High range on piccolo trumpet isn't exactly what you'd expect. It doesn't give you a full octave above the B flat trumpet's range, despite the fundamental pitch of the piccolo trumpet being an octave higher. It makes the high range easier because the partials in the upper register aren't as close together as they are on the big horn. So it's a lot easier to navigate dexterous passages up there with agility and accuracy, like you heard in the Magnificat. So my guidance for piccolo trumpet is an F at the top of the staff written is the highest most players will ever be asked to play. They should be able to comfortably do that. So that's a concert E flat on the B flat pick or a concert D on the A pick, same written range for both. Some composers have asked for higher. Gs show up occasionally, and it's not so out of the ordinary that a performer won't be able to do it. It's just quite difficult, and please consider that. If you're writing a part with high Gs in it for pick, give us some rests. However, some composers do go even higher than this. Maslanka, in his Fourth Symphony, writes a piccolo part with a high A in it for B flat pick, so that's a concert G on the fourth ledger line above the staff. And it's really difficult, but it's really effective in combination with the other high instruments it's paired with, like E flat clarinet and piccolo, playing this brilliant descant over the entire band. And let's listen to that now. The last thing I'd add about the piccolo trumpet is that although it does give us access to some of those higher notes, and composers have taken really great advantage of that, it's mostly a color instrument. A high C on B flat trumpet sounds very different than the same sounding pitch played on piccolo, and it can give this really great bright color that really projects in a very different way than the B-flat trumpet. And it is totally possible to play some of the same notes that are in the extended register of the piccolo trumpet on the bighorn. It just sounds very, very different. And actually, here's something I've been working on the bighorn to expand my range, and you'll hear just how different it sounds than on the little one. Alright, and now for our first auxiliary that isn't some kind of trumpet, the cornet. I'm an avid cornetist myself and play in a British brass band, which is the primary instrumentation that you'll see it in, but it's not to say it's the only one. Cornet parts do show up in wind band music and also occasionally in orchestra. There's a great cornet obbligato in Symphonie Fantastique, but it generally has stayed mostly in the band world. In terms of the actual differences between the trumpet and cornet, the cornet is more conical and is played with a deeper, more V-shaped mouthpiece that allows for a warmer, rounder sound. And this is one of the aspects in which the cornet is used very well, is for beautiful lyrical playing, like in this gorgeous solo, Share My Yoke, which you'll hear now. The other aspect where the cornet really shines is in its technical playing. There's a tradition in British brass bands of playing transcriptions of orchestral works, and a lot of times the violin parts of those pieces will get put in the front row or the solo cornet parts. So we have to play these very challenging virtuosic lines with lots of 16th notes and scalar passages that are super idiomatic for strings, and maybe a little bit less so for brass. But that's one of the big ways that the cornet is differentiated. In a lot of military band writing, where there are separate trumpet and cornet parts, the trumpets take on a more fanfare style role, playing these lines that line up with some of the percussion parts, like how the trumpet was used in Beethoven's symphonies, and more militaristic parts, like in marches. You'll hear a lot of trumpets. When there are trumpet and cornet parts separate, you'll hear a lot of the trumpets playing these fanfare lines using a lot of the open harmonic series like bugle calls, where the cornets are playing some of the more florid passages. So here's a great technical work for cornet, Philip Sparke, Seer of the Dragon. Alright, and last we have the flugelhorn. So the flugelhorn also, just like the cornet, makes an appearance in the British brass band, but it's also seen in jazz and band writing a lot as well. The flugelhorn is very conical. The cornet is about somewhere between the trumpet and the flugelhorn, and just like the cornet, it's also played with a deep V-shaped mouthpiece. My flugelhorn mouthpiece, I don't know how much you'll be able to see it on here, is extremely deep and has a really nice, rich, warm, smooth sound. Another fun fact about the flugelhorn, we actually do have access to the fundamental pitch of the instrument. On all of the other trumpets, the first open partial is actually not the fundamental pitch of the instrument. That fundamental an octave below is not accessible, so our first harmonics are the root, fifth, root, major third, fifth, instead of root, root, fifth, root. The flugelhorn actually does have access to it though, and you can go chromatically down to the notes below it, and that actually takes you all the way down to an F sharp written at the bottom of the bass clef staff, the lowest note on the trombone. So we can play low too. The flugelhorn excels at playing lyrical melodies and anything that needs to be really smooth and beautiful. And this is one of the times when it really shows up in concert band writing, is as a solo instrument, either on its own part or with the principal trumpet player switching to flugelhorn for a solo. And the only caution in this is we technically have the same range as all of the other trumpets, but due to the fact that the mouthpiece is so deep and the construction of the instrument, the upper register does tend to sound a bit strained and thin. So you'll hear in this excerpt from Winds of Nagual by Michael Colgrass that the flugelhorn only goes up to a written concert F on or concert F written G at the top of the staff, because that's really the range in which it shines best. So here's that.